There's a price you pay for seeing the world differently, a price that no one ever told you existed, a price you only discover when it's too late to go back. Carl Jung documented hundreds of cases of people who carried this burden, people who could read what was behind the words, who could feel the tension hidden in every room, who could see lies the instant they were spoken, and all of these people had something in common. They all felt deeply, inexplicably, chronically, alone, even surrounded by family, even with friends, even in relationships. There was a type of loneliness that no amount of company could cure. Jung called this the cost of awareness. And what Andrew Huberman has discovered in the lab about the brain confirms exactly why this price is so high. If you feel like you've always seen things that others simply can't, this video will reveal why that is, and more importantly, what you can do about it. But first, you need to understand what it really means to have this heightened perception. Jung described in his clinical writings a phenomenon he observed repeatedly in his practice. Certain patients exhibited what he called heightened perception. It wasn't some supernatural ability. It was a real and measurable capacity to process social and emotional information at a much deeper level than most people. These people could detect micro-expressions, those tiny facial movements that last fractions of a second, and reveal true emotions. They could sense when someone was uncomfortable, even before any visible signs. They could perceive patterns of behavior that others took years to recognize. And here is the devastating problem. Seeing what others don't doesn't bring you closer to people. It pushes you away, because there's an invisible dynamic that Jung observed. In all these individuals, the more clearly you see reality, the harder it becomes to participate in the collective illusion that keeps most relationships functioning. People don't want to know. They're being manipulated, and they don't want to hear that their partner is lying. They don't want to recognize the destructive patterns that you see so clearly. And when you offer this insight, even with the best intentions, you become the messenger of news that no one asked to receive. Jung documented cases where patients with heightened perception reported being systematically excluded from social groups, not because of inappropriate behavior, but simply because they saw too much, because they asked questions that others preferred not to answer, because they perceived truths that the group had tacitly agreed to ignore. Jung wrote something that perfectly defines this experience. He said that loneliness doesn't come from not having people around. Loneliness comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to yourself, or to maintain views that others consider inadmissible. Think about that for a moment. You're in a conversation and you realize the person is lying. You feel the manipulation happening in real time. You see the social mask constantly adjusting, and you can't say anything, because if you do, you become the problem. You become too intense, too complicated, too negative. So you learn to stay silent. You learn to pretend. You learn to participate in superficial conversations as if they were satisfying. And every time you do that, a part of you dies a little. Jung documented this process with clinical precision. He observed that people with heightened perception frequently became targets of projection. Others unconsciously attacked them for reflecting what they refused to see in themselves. The person who saw clearly became the scapegoat. They were blamed for creating problems that they only revealed. This explains why you may have spent your life being called too sensitive, too critical, too observant, as if perceiving reality was some kind of personality defect. Andrew Huberman. and other neuroscientists have confirmed what Jung intuited decades ago. Recent research in the neuroscience of perception reveals that there are real and measurable differences in how different brains process information. A study published in 2025 on neurodiversity accuracy demonstrated that individuals with what researchers call neural hyperconnectivity process patterns significantly more intensely than the average. Their brains literally capture more information from the environment. It's not imagination. It's not excessive sensitivity. It's different neural architecture. These brains don't filter information in the same way where most people automatically discard ambiguous signals. These brains process them completely. Where others see a simple conversation, these brains detect the layers of subtext, the non-verbal contradictions, the suppressed emotions. It's like having an internal lie detector running permanently. You can't turn it off. You can't choose when it operates. It simply picks up everything all the time, and the energetic cost of this is immense. Research from 2024 has demonstrated that intensive neural processing consumes significantly more metabolic resources. People with heightened perception frequently report chronic exhaustion that is not explained by conventional physical factors. Dr. Christoph Koch, in a conversation with Huberman in September of 2025 about how to expand consciousness, explained the concept of a perception box. Each person experiences life through a unique box that contains their beliefs, memories, and therefore their biases about reality. People with heightened perception have a larger box. They capture more, they process more, they see more. And here's the cruel paradox. The more you see, the less you can share. The more you understand, the less you are understood. Jung was extremely precise about this. He wrote that if a man knows more than others, he becomes lonely. It's not a possibility, it's an inevitability. Knowledge creates isolation because genuine communication requires shared references. When your perception operates on a different level, you are constantly translating your experience into a language that others can understand. And in that translation, something essential is always lost. It's like trying to describe colors to someone who was born blind. You can use metaphors, the comparisons and approximation, but the direct experience remains untransmissible. And that's not just uncomfortable, it's existentially isolating. Jung recognized that this loneliness is not accidental. It's almost as if loneliness is the required price. For those with heightened perception, loneliness becomes the crucible, the school, in which you're forced to learn how to bear your uniqueness as an individual. This theme provided Carl Jung with the core of his later writings on individuation. Individuation is the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, not who society wants them to be, not who their family expects, not who would be most convenient, but who they genuinely are, including their heightened perception. And here's what so few understand. Isolation isn't just an unwanted side effect of this process. It's a necessary component. The Jungian analyst Darrell Sharp observed that for the development of personality, the first fruit is the segregation of the individual from the undifferentiated and unconscious herd. This means isolation. And there is no more comforting word for it. There's no more comforting word, because isolation, in this context, isn't punishment, it's purification. You need to separate yourself from the collective to discover what is genuinely yours. You need to experience loneliness, to develop internal resources that don't depend on external validation. This doesn't mean you should live in permanent isolation. It means you need to learn to be alone without being empty. You need to develop a relationship with yourself that is as real as any external relationship. Carl Jung wrote, that it's always important to have something to bring to a relationship, and solitude is often the mean by which you acquire it. You can't offer depth to others if you don't possess it yourself, and depth comes from reflection, from self-awareness, from time spent with yourself. Neuroscientific research on pattern recognition confirms something crucial. It's not that people with heightened perception see things that don't exist, they see things that others simply don't process. Consciously, the patterns are there. The information is available, but most brains filter this information before it even reaches awareness. In neurodivergent individuals, including those with traits of high sensitivity, differently connected cognitive processes can lead to more intense forms of pattern recognition, particularly in areas of strong personal interest or high emotional significance. According to Andrew Huberman, this is all about neural circuitry. This explains why you can walk into a room and immediately feel that something is wrong. Long before you have any concrete evidence, your brain is processing thousands of micro-signals that other brains discard as noise. And this is simultaneously a gift and a curse. A gift, because you have access to information that others don't. A curse, because you can't turn off this processing. It happens automatically, constantly, exhaustively. Carl Jung identified only two possible paths for people with this heightened perception: destruction through isolation and overstimulation, or transformation through integration. Destruction happens when a person tries to suppress their perception, when they force themselves to pretend they don't see, when they internalize the message that there's something wrong with them for perceiving too much. This leads to burnout, to dissociation, to depression. The nervous system enters into conflict with itself. The conscious mind denies what the unconscious mind continues processing. The result is fragmentation. Carl Jung described this state as an internal civil war. One part of you continues perceiving everything with brutal clarity. Another part of you tries desperately to silence that perception in order to survive socially, and these two parts are in constant conflict. The nervous system cannot sustain this division indefinitely. At some point, something gives. Either you collapse or you integrate, and integration is the only path that doesn't lead to destruction. Transformation happens when a person accepts their perception as part of who they are, when they stop fighting against their nature and start working with it. This doesn't mean expressing everything you see. It doesn't mean confronting every lie, pointing out every manipulation, exposing every mask. It means developing discernment about when and how to use your perception. It means creating healthy boundaries between what you perceive and what you choose to respond to. Carl Jung called this integration of the shadow. Your heightened perception is part of your shadows, not because it's negative, but because you've repressed it, because you learned to hide it, because you were punished for expressing it. Bringing that perception into conscious light, accepting it as part of who you are, is the first step toward transformation. Neuroscience in 2024 and 2025 confirms that the brain can be reshaped through conscious practices. Neuroplasticity allows you to develop new ways to process and respond to the information that you pick up. Andrew Huberman talks extensively about this. You can't change what you see, but you can change how you respond to what you see. Huberman has discussed extensively how practices like meditation, controlled breathing, and other interventions can modify the way the nervous system processes stress and emotional information. For someone with heightened perception, this means developing the ability to observe without reacting, to perceive without absorbing, to see clearly without being destroyed by what you see. Carl Jung had a specific prescription for this. He developed the process of active imagination, a technique where a person consciously dialogues with aspects of themselves that normally remain unconscious. For someone who sees too much, when this might mean dialoguing with the part of you that is exhausted from perceiving, that's tired of carrying information that others don't want to hear, that feels chronically misunderstood, that part needs to be heard. It needs to be validated. It needs to know that your perception isn't a defect. It's a capacity. There's something that happens when you stop fighting against your nature, when you accept that you were built to perceive more than most, when you stop apologizing for seeing what others prefer to ignore. You start to find your tribe. Carl Jung called this finding the others. It's not an active process of searching, necessarily. It's more like a magnetism that arises naturally. When you stop hiding, when you stop spending energy, suppressing who you are, that energy becomes available for genuine connection. And genuine connection has a specific frequency that others with heightened perception recognize immediately. Not people who see exactly like you, but people who also pay the price of seeing differently. People who understand isolation without needing an explanation. People who recognize the loneliness of insight because they also carry it. Jung observed that individuation doesn't lead to permanent isolation. It leads to a different kind of connection. A connection based on authenticity instead of conformity, on depth instead of surface, on truth instead of mere convenience. And these connections, while rarer, are infinitely more satisfying. Because when you finally find someone who sees as you see, the feeling of recognition is overwhelming. Decades of isolation dissolve in a moment of genuine understanding. You're not alone. You never were, really. You just didn't know where to look. Others like you are also in their own isolations, also wondering if they're the only ones who see what they see, also tired of pretending they don't perceive. And when these people find each other, something extraordinary happens. The cost of awareness transforms from a solitary burden. It becomes a bridge of connection. Research on neural synchronization demonstrates that when two people connect on a deep level, their brains literally synchronize. Patterns of neural activity begin to mirror one another. For someone with heightened perception, finding a person with whom your brain can synchronize is a transformative experience. It's finding home in another person. Jung spoke about this in terms of withdrawal of projection. When you stop projecting your unacknowledged qualities onto others, you become able to see them as they really are. And more importantly, you become able to be seen as you really are. This requires courage. It requires vulnerability. It requires a willingness to be known in your totality, including the part of you that sees too much and feels isolated by it. But it's the only path to genuine connection. The surface will never be enough for you. Conversations about the weather and trivialities will always seem unsatisfying. Relationships based on mutual masks will always leave you empty. You were built for depth, and depth requires the courage to be completely seen. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation is the point. You're not seeking someone who makes you comfortable in your isolation. You're seeking someone who invites you out of it, someone who sees your heightened perception not as a threat, but as a gift, who values your ability to see deeply, who doesn't feel attacked by your clarity, but illuminated by it. These people exist. They're in their own processes of individuation. They're also learning to accept their own heightened perceptions. And when you meet, it's not coincidence, it's recognition. Huberman has discussed in various episodes how the brain is shaped by our experiences and relationships. Neuroplasticity means that prolonged isolation literally changes the structure of your brain. But it also means that deep connections can reverse those changes. Your brain isn't doomed to isolation. It's waiting for the right connections to flourish differently. Research on the default mode network, the brain's resting network, reveals something fascinating. People with heightened perception often show distinct patterns of activity in this network. Their brain processes social and emotional information, even when it's not consciously focused on anything. This explains why you can be resting and still feel the emotional energy of people around you. Your brain never completely stops processing, and that characteristic, although exhausting, also means you have a capacity for connection that others simply don't possess. When you finally find someone compatible, the depth of that connection exceeds anything people with more superficial processing can experience. The challenge isn't to eliminate your vision. The challenge is to integrate it in a way that it serves you, instead of destroying you. Jung said that those who learn nothing from the unpleasant facts of life force the cosmic existence to reproduce them, as many times as it's necessary for them to learn what the experience should have taught them. If you continue feeling isolated, the lesson isn't to learn to see less. The lesson is to learn to work with what you see. Isolation is not your destiny. It's your starting point. From here, you have choices. You can continue suppressing your perception and paying the psychological price of that suppression, or you can begin the work of integration. Jung mapped this path with precision. Individuation isn't an abstract concept. It's a practical process of becoming whole. It means recognizing and accepting the parts of yourself that you've hidden. It means developing a conscious relationship with your unconscious. It means finding your own center instead of living through others. And it means, eventually, offering the world what you uniquely can offer. Your heightened perception isn't an accident. It's not a manufacturing error. It's your purpose taking shape through your biology. The world needs people who see clearly, who perceive what others ignore, who aren't fooled by surfaces. But the world isn't always ready to hear what you have to say. And part of your journey is developing discernment about when to speak and when to observe in silence. Not every truth needs to be told. Not every perception needs to be expressed. Knowing the difference is wisdom. Jung spent decades developing this wisdom. He also saw more than most, also paid the price of isolation, also needed to find his way through the loneliness of knowledge. And what he discovered is that the price isn't final, it's transformable. Jung lived this transformation personally. After his break with Freud, he experienced years of what he called confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense loneliness and visions that others would have considered madness. But instead of being destroyed by it, he integrated these experiences, transformed them into insight, used his isolation to develop the entire system of analytical psychology that continues helping millions of people decades after his death. The very process that almost destroyed him became the foundation of his legacy. And that's the promise for you too. What seems unbearable now contains the seeds of what you can offer the world later. Isolation can become fertile solitude. Loneliness can become space for growth. The pain of being misunderstood can become compassion for others who also suffer. Nothing is wasted on the path of individuation. Every experience, including the most painful, contributes to who you are becoming, and who you are becoming is someone the world desperately needs. Someone who sees clearly, who perceives patterns, who isn't easily fooled. Someone who can offer others the depth that surfaces never provide. The price of seeing the world differently is real. You can't avoid it. You can't negotiate it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist, but you can transform it. You can use the isolation as a space for growth. You can use the loneliness as a school for self-awareness. You can use the pain of being misunderstood as a bridge to understanding others. Carl Jung predicted all of this. Andrew Huberman has confirmed the neurological mechanisms. The scientific research validates what your inner experience already knew. You're not wrong for seeing too much. You just haven't learned how to work with what you see. yet, and that learning is possible. It's the work of a lifetime, but it is possible. The first step is to stop apologizing for your heightened perception. Stop diminishing it. Stop treating it like a problem to be solved. Your heightened perception is a capacity to be developed. The second step is to find others who understand, not because you need external validation, but because the journey is long and companionship makes all the difference. The third step is to begin the internal work. Whether through Jungian analysis, meditation, reflective writing, or any practice that helps you develop awareness about how you process what you see. The fourth step is to learn to create boundaries between what you perceive and what you respond to, between what you know and what you reveal, between your intense inner life and your external interactions. The fifth step is to start offering your perception to the world in ways that serve, not as judgment, but as clarity, not as criticism, but as insight, not as a weapon, but as a light. Carl Jung said that what you resist persists, and what you look at disappears. This is perhaps the most fundamental psychological law he discovered. Everything you try to push out of consciousness gains power in the unconscious, and everything you bring into conscious light loses its power over you. Your isolation is no exception to this rule. The more you resist it, the more it controls you. The more you look at it directly, the more it begins to transform. Look at your isolation. Look at your loneliness. Look at the price you pay for seeing differently. And let that conscious gaze begin the transformation. You are not alone in this. Others like you are also looking, also transforming, also finding their way through the loneliness of insight. And when you're ready, you will find each other, not by accident, by recognition, because those who see recognize others who see. And in that recognition, the cost of awareness finally finds its value, not as a solitary burden, but as a bridge of connection. If you feel this loneliness of someone who sees too much, leave a comment with the word vision. You are not alone in this isolation, and isolation is not your final destination. It's just the beginning of your individuation.